The year was 2045, and the world was crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. Earth, a once thriving cradle of human ingenuity, was now a battlefield of inequality and despair. The streets, once filled with life and hope, had become arenas for clashes between frustrated citizens and the brutal forces of corrupt governments. The air was thick with anger, poverty, and hunger. People who once believed in the promise of progress now saw only decay. The sun rose over the city of New York, its light casting a pale glow over the dilapidated skyscrapers. Below, the streets were filled with protesters, their signs raised high, demanding change. But their cries were drowned out by the sound of riot gear clashing with the pavement. Armed guards, hired by the government, stood on every corner, their faces hidden behind masks, ready to silence any dissent. The people had tried everything: voting, petitions, strikes, bet nothing had changed. The government was not listening. The government was never listening. The protagonist, Zara, watched from the balcony of her small apartment. The protests outside had become routine, but today something felt different. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Zara, a young woman in her early 30s, had seen it all: the inequality, the corruption, the lies. She worked in a public office, where every day was a reminder of how far the government had fallen. She was surrounded by people who claimed to work for the greater good, yet every decision they made was self-serving. Zara had tried to make a difference, but it felt like trying to plug a hole in a dam with her hands. The system was too big, too powerful, and it had long since stopped caring about the people it was meant to serve. As the protests outside grew louder, Zara sighed and closed the window. She had been part of the movement, at least in the early days, when hope still existed. But now, it seemed like the same story over and over again. The people would protest, the government would suppress them, and life would go on as if nothing had changed. Zara had lost her faith in human systems long ago. There had to be another way. But what? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Raphael, a fellow activist and one of the few people she still trusted in this world. She opened the message. "We need to meet. It's urgent. You'll want to see this." Zara's heart skipped a beat. Raphael never texted her like this. There was always something urgent, something that needed to be done, but it had never felt so dire. She quickly grabbed her coat and headed out. The streets were a familiar sight, yet today they seemed even more oppressive. The distant sounds of sirens and chanting filled the air. People walked with their heads down, keeping to themselves, as if too weary to engage. Zara passed the barricades that had been set up by the government to separate the rich from the poor. On one side, shiny new skyscrapers stood like monuments to power. On the other, run-down buildings and homeless camps sprawled across every corner. The divide between the two had grown wider over the years, but no one ever seemed to care. Zara arrived at the small cafe where Raphael had asked her to meet. It was tucked away on a side street, hidden from the watchful eyes of the authorities. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet, a refuge from the chaos outside. Raphael was already there, sitting in the corner, his face a mix of concern and determination. "Zara," he said as she sat down, his voice low, "I've been trying to reach you. I think we've found something important." Zara raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" He pulled out his tablet and showed her a series of images. At first glance, they looked like nothing more than scrambled data lines of code, strange symbols, and a pattern that seemed to defy logic. But as she studied it more closely, Zara's breath caught in her throat. The symbols were not of this world. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. "This is a signal," Raphael explained, his voice trembling slightly. "A transmission. From space." Zara's mind raced. "Space? What are you saying?" Someone, or something, has been sending us messages. And it's not just a random signal. It's too structured, too deliberate. I think we're being contacted." Zara leaned back in her chair, trying to process what Raphael was telling her. By who? "I don't know," Raphael replied, his eyes searching hers for answers. "But I think, I think it's our chance. We've tried everything here, Zara, but maybe, just maybe, this is the answer we've been waiting for." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. A part of her wanted to dismiss the idea, to laugh it off as another conspiracy. But the desperation inside her, the same desperation she saw in the eyes of the protesters every day, made her hesitate. Could it be true? Could they really be contacting Earth? And if so, what did they want? She looked at Raphael, his face full of hope, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? Could these beings from the stars bring the change they had all been fighting for? Before Zara could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. She read the headline aloud. Mysterious. Signals detected from deep space. Governments across the world in chaos. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The news was spreading faster than she expected. Governments were already scrambling to make sense of the situation. Some dismissed it as a hoax. Others feared the unknown. But one thing was clear. The world was waking up. Raphael grabbed her hand. "This is it. This is our chance, Zara. We need to get ahead of this. People are already calling it a sign-an, answer from beyond the stars." Zara took a deep breath. She had no idea what was coming, but one thing was certain. Humanity had reached the end of its rope. And maybe, just maybe, the answer to their problems didn't lie in the hands of their broken governments. It lay in the stars. As the night fell, Zara found herself standing on the roof of her apartment building, staring at the sky. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But it was fragile, like a candle, flickering in the wind. The world needed help. And if the stars were offering it, she wasn't going to turn away. Somewhere out there, the message was waiting, and she was ready to listen. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. The night after her meeting with Raphael, she barely slept, tossing and turning as the possibilities spun in her mind. Could it be true? Were extraterrestrials really reaching out to Earth, offering to fix the damage humanity had done to itself? She woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. The same news alert, now with an update. Experts confirm that the signals are unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. It seemed the world had finally caught up with what she and Raphael had been discussing. The entire planet was on edge, uncertain of what these mysterious signals meant, but some were beginning to hope that this was the intervention they had been longing for. For the first time in history, people across the globe began to unite under a common belief. Alien intervention was their only chance for salvation. Zara met Raphael again the next day, this time at a public rally. It had been organized by a growing movement of people, inspired by the idea that Earth's problems could only be solved with help from beyond. The rally was peaceful, but the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. People waved signs that read hope from the stars and aliens for Earth's future. Some were even chanting slogans about peace, prosperity, and a new age for humanity. Raphael found Zara in the crowd, his eyes wide with excitement. "Zara, you won't believe it. The governments are starting to take this seriously. The United Nations has called an emergency meeting to address the signals. They're not dismissing it anymore. They're talking about a coordinated, global response." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen this kind of global attention before, and it gave her a sense of optimism she hadn't felt in years. She had spent her whole life fighting against a broken system, one that seemed impervious to change. Now, humanity was being offered something that might just save it. Something or someone from the stars. "Raphael," Zara said, her voice filled with both excitement and uncertainty. "Do you think this is really happening? Are we really about to get help from another civilization? Raphael nodded. I think so, but we have to act quickly. People are waking up to the truth. They see this as their chance, and we can't let it slip away. The idea of a peaceful alien intervention sounded almost too good to be true, and yet, as Zara stood there, among the throngs of hopeful faces, she couldn't deny the rising tide of possibility. Could the aliens truly help fix Earth's broken systems? Could they eliminate corruption, end hunger, and provide universal health care to every person on the planet? Could they restore human rights to those who had been denied them for so long? As the rally continued, Zara and Raphael walked to a nearby newsstand, where they could catch up on the latest developments. The headlines were now dominated by reports of government meetings, experts speculating on the origins of the signals, and growing protests calling for immediate action. The biggest surprise came when an official statement was released by the International Space Agency. It confirmed that the signals were coming from an organized source, and the transmission was undoubtedly a message from an extraterrestrial civilization. There was no denying it anymore. The message was clear. We are watching. We are coming. Zara read the statement aloud to Raphael. What do you think that means, Raphael? What are they trying to say? Raphael shook his head. I don't know. But I think we're on the brink of something huge. People are going to start believing. I can feel it. The feeling in the air was undeniable. The energy of the crowd, the growing belief in a possible extraterrestrial savior. It was like the entire planet was holding its breath. Could this be the answer humanity had been searching for? A force beyond their own reach? One that had watched over Earth from the beginning and now was stepping forward to offer help. Later that evening, as Zara returned to her apartment, the gravity of the situation hit her. It was no longer a far-off fantasy or a conspiracy theory. This was real. The world was no longer alone, and something from the stars had been watching them, waiting for the right moment to intervene. The following day, Earth's first extraterrestrial message was broadcast globally. It wasn't just a cryptic transmission anymore. It was a declaration. The Vasaari, as they called themselves, had arrived. The message was delivered directly through every screen on the planet, from televisions to mobile devices. It was direct and simple, yet its implications were profound. We are the Vasaari. We have been observing your planet for millennia. Your civilizations have grown, and your struggles are known to us. We have the technology and the wisdom to restore balance to your world. We come to offer peace, equality, and prosperity. Earth has been left in chaos for too long. It is time to rebuild. The words were calm, measured, and reassuring. They were not threatening. They were not demanding. They were an invitation, a lifeline thrown to a world drowning in its own mistakes. Zara's heart raced as she watched the broadcast. She wasn't sure what to think. Who were these beings? Why had they waited so long to make themselves known? What did they truly want? And why now? The aliens did not say when they would arrive, only that they would make their presence known soon. The world, already in chaos, had now been given a glimpse of hope. Or was it hope? Zara wasn't sure. It was too early to tell, but the idea that someone was coming to help was both terrifying and thrilling. Over the next few days, the world's reaction was a mixture of excitement and skepticism. World leaders, political analysts, and experts in various fields were thrust into the spotlight as they tried to make sense of the Vasaari's message, while some leaders, particularly those with vested interests in maintaining the status quo, dismissed the transmission as a hoax. Others saw it for what it was, an opportunity. The entire world had been given a chance for something better, something bigger than anything humanity could have imagined. At a press conference, the UN Secretary-General, Adrian Silva, spoke to the world. We have received a message from a peaceful civilization. While we cannot yet fully understand their intentions, we must act swiftly. We must unite as one world to prepare for the arrival of the Vasaari. They are offering us an opportunity to change. We must be open to this chance for peace and prosperity. The call for unity echoed across the globe. For the first time in history, it seemed that humanity could overcome its divisions, could come together under the banner of something greater than their petty squabbles. But even as the world rallied behind this new hope, a sense of unease lingered in the background. Was this truly the solution humanity had been waiting for, or was there something darker at play? Zara stood on the rooftop of her apartment again that night, staring up at the stars. She had spent so many years fighting against a system that seemed irreparable, but now, there was a chance. The Vasaari were coming. They were offering a way out of the nightmare humanity had created. But what would Earth do with this opportunity? Could humanity change? Could they accept this help without losing their autonomy? And if the Vasaari were truly here to help, what price would they ask in return? As she watched the night sky, Zara made a silent promise to herself. She would find out. She would fight for the future of Earth, no matter what it took. The day the Vasaari arrived was unlike any other in Earth's history. It began like any ordinary day, with the rising sun casting its early light over the world. But by mid-afternoon, the sky itself had changed, as if nature itself had responded to the arrival of something otherworldly. Across the globe, millions of people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. They watched in awe as strange, shimmering lights appeared high above, their shapes unlike anything ever seen before. The Vasaari had come. Zara stood on the balcony of her apartment, the same place she had stood countless times before, but now, the world seemed different. She could feel the shift in the air. There was an energy, a hum, a pulse that vibrated through her very core. She couldn't explain it, but it was as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting. People around her gathered in small clusters, staring upwards, their faces a mixture of hope, disbelief, and fear. The news spread quickly. The world's major cities were filled with people looking up at the sky, their eyes wide with wonder and anxiety. Governments and media outlets tried to maintain order, but the sheer magnitude of the event rendered their efforts futile. For the first time in living memory, the entire planet was united in a single moment. Regardless of nationality, background, or beliefs, humanity shared a singular focus. The Vasaari had arrived. Zara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she watched the descending ships, their forms ethereal and gleaming like something from a dream. They were massive, far larger than anything humanity had ever built, towering above the tallest skyscrapers. Their presence was imposing yet strangely comforting. They moved silently through the air, descending slowly, as if gliding down to greet the world they had promised to restore. The Vasaari ships were not like the science fiction vessels humans had imagined. There were no sharp edges, no metallic gleam. Instead, they were smooth and organic, their surface shimmering like the light reflecting off water. The colors shifted as they moved, blues and silvers and soft greens, giving them an almost living appearance. Zara's eyes welled with tears, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. She had seen pictures of alien ships before, in films and books, but this was real. This wasn't fiction or fantasy. The world was no longer the same. The silence was broken when a voice, clear and calm, yet resonating deeply, spoke from above. It was broadcast simultaneously across all media channels, reaching every corner of Earth. We are the Vasaari. We have come to restore balance. We have watched your world, and we have heard your calls for help. It is time for you to rebuild, and we will help guide you. Together, we will create a new era of peace, equality, and prosperity. The voice wasn't mechanical, nor was it cold. It was filled with empathy, like a wise and gentle elder offering guidance. It felt as though the voice was speaking directly into the hearts of those who listened, bypassing the need for words and touching something deeper inside. People, for the first time in many years, felt a sense of peace. They felt that the answer to their suffering was finally here, but not everyone shared the same feeling. Across the world, reactions were mixed. For some, the arrival of the Vasaari was a dream come true. Governments, initially hesitant, began to signal their willingness to cooperate. The UN convened emergency meetings to discuss how best to integrate the Vasaari's technology into Earth's infrastructure. Leaders who had been complicit in the ongoing suffering now had no choice but to acknowledge the presence of a power far beyond their control. But there was another side to the story. There were those who resisted, who saw the arrival of the Vasaari as a threat to human sovereignty. Governments in several countries, especially those whose leaders had been entrenched in corruption, began to rally against the intervention. They feared the loss of control, the disappearance of their power. Could Earth truly accept the changes the Vasaari offered without losing its identity? Would they become subjugated to a higher force, alien to their ways of life? The resistance began to take shape almost immediately. Extremists, political figures, and military leaders who felt threatened by the Vasaari's influence began to organize. They spread fear and propaganda, warning the people that the Vasaari could not be trusted, that their presence would lead to the destruction of Earth's natural order. Zara, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the Vasaari were here to help. They weren't here to conquer or control. They were here to offer assistance, to help rebuild what humanity had broken. She had seen the effects of corruption firsthand: hunger, the sickness, the inequality. How could they possibly be worse than the system they had now? Zara knew that change was coming, and she felt a deep responsibility to be part of it. She couldn't stand by while fear and resistance held the world back. There was so much to be done, and the Vasaari had promised their help. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and sacrifices. It was up to humanity to decide whether to embrace this unprecedented opportunity or reject it in favor of the old ways. The first contact was made shortly after the ships landed. The Vasaari didn't simply land and remain silent. They approached humanity with a plan. They began to release their technology to world leaders, showing how they could quickly end the most pressing issues Earth faced. The world's most corrupt financial systems were dismantled almost overnight. With the Vasaari's advanced technology, poverty was alleviated in major cities. Healthcare, once reserved for the wealthy, became a universal right. The Vasaari offered their energy-efficient technologies that could end global fuel crises, and agricultural solutions that could solve world hunger. Still, as these changes unfolded, the resistance grew stronger. There were questions. Why had the Vasaari waited so long to intervene? What were their true motives? Could humanity trust them? Were they here to help or control? These doubts would not be easily silenced, and the world was divided. In the midst of all of this, Zara found herself in a new role, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She was called upon by activists, community leaders, and even government officials to help bridge the gap between the growing opposition and the possibility of transformation. She knew that this was not just a moment for political or social change, it was a moment for humanity to decide what kind of future it wanted. As Zara returned to her apartment that evening, she stood on the balcony again. The night was quiet, save for the distant hum of the ships. The Vasaari had begun to set up operations, their structures blending seamlessly with Earth's existing infrastructure. It was as if they had always belonged here, like they were part of a long-forgotten plan for Earth's future. Zara's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from her phone. It was a message from Raphael. "It's starting, Zara. The world is changing. We need to be ready for what comes next." Zara stood still for a moment, staring out at the lights of the city. The future was uncertain, and it was up to humanity to decide what role it would play in this new world. Would they accept the Vasaari's help, or would they fall back into the same patterns that had caused so much suffering? The Vasaari had come, but now it was up to Earth to take the first step forward. As the days passed after the Vasaari's arrival, the world began to settle into a strange, uncertain peace. Governments across the globe scrambled to form alliances with the Vasaari, with many jumping at the chance to embrace their advanced technology and promise of prosperity. But beneath the surface, a quiet, growing resistance began to form. It wasn't as though the entire world rejected the Vasaari's intervention. Rather, it was a vocal minority of leaders and citizens who feared losing their sovereignty, their autonomy, and the control they had long held over the people. Zara watched this rise of resistance from the sidelines, her heart torn between her belief in the Vasaari's peaceful mission and her growing concern about the forces rising against them. As much as she believed in the aliens' motives, she couldn't ignore the reality. Not everyone shared her optimism. People were scared, uncertain, and the alien presence had sparked fears of colonization, loss of identity, and manipulation. The first signs of resistance came in the form of small protest groups of citizens marching in opposition to the Vasaari's presence. At first, these protests were disorganized, lacking a central leadership. They chanted slogans like "Take back our world," and "We don't need aliens to save us." The media, though initially enamored with the Vasaari, now turned its attention to the growing dissent, feeding into the narrative of distrust and fear. Zara was approached by a number of her activist friends, urging her to join the resistance and fight for Earth's freedom. Some argued that the Vasaari's help was just a facade, a cleverly disguised takeover of Earth's resources and power. Others believed that humanity had to stand on its own, that relying on an alien species would make them weak, dependent, and ultimately subservient to a greater force. At the heart of this resistance was a man named Victor De Luca, a former government official who had lost everything in the wave of corruption that had been exposed by the Vasaari. His rise to power had been built on lies, deceit, and manipulation, and the Vasaari had made sure the world knew just how deep his hands were in the pockets of the wealthy elite. With his reputation destroyed, De Luca had become one of the most vocal voices against the Vasaari. De Luca's rhetoric was simple but effective. Humanity does not need a savior from the stars. We need to take back our world. The Vasaari are not here to help, they are here to control. Zara had met De Luca once, years ago, during a political summit on the state of global inequality. Even then, she had sensed a coldness in him, a certain ambition that was cloaked beneath his polished speeches. But now, seeing him at the helm of a growing movement, she couldn't help but feel a deep unease. De Luca had a magnetic presence, and his words resonated with many who felt betrayed by the Vasaari's intervention. Zara found herself caught between two worlds. On one side, she saw the overwhelming benefits the Vasaari were offering solutions to poverty, universal healthcare, access to education, and the elimination of corruption. On the other side, she saw people like De Luca, with their deep-seated fears and suspicions. People who believed that the Vasaari's true agenda was to reshape Earth into something unrecognizable. Her internal conflict grew as the weeks went on. She attended secret meetings with both the Vasaari and the resistance. The Vasaari, with their calm and reassuring presence, insisted they were here to help, that they had no interest in taking control of Earth. Their only goal was to provide the tools necessary to rebuild a society based on fairness and equality. The resistance, however, painted a different picture, one of alien manipulation and global subjugatio. It wasn't just about politics, it was about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of being replaced by a higher power. Most difficult meeting came one night, when De Luca himself reached out to her. He had heard of her involvement with the alien movement and wanted to meet. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she couldn't turn down the opportunity to understand his perspective. They met in a private room in a nondescript building. Far from the prying eyes of the public, De Luca was exactly as she remembered, confident, with a hint of arrogance beneath his polite demeanor. "You know, Zara," he began, his voice smooth but firm, "I was once like you, full of idealism. I thought I could change the world, make it a better place for the people. But look where it got me. The truth is, the Vasaari aren't here to fix anything. They're here to change the way we live. And once they've done that, we'll be just another colony, just another civilization under their thumb." Zara looked at him, intrigued but cautious. "But the Vasaari have already shown what they can do. They've ended poverty. They've given us technology to solve our energy crises, and they've given healthcare to millions. How can you say they're not here to help?" Diluca leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "You think? They're offering this out of kindness. These are beings who have watched us for millennia. Do you really believe they've come down from the stars just to make us better? They've played the long game, Zara. They've been preparing for this for years. Watching, waiting, and now they're giving us what we need to survive. But at what cost? What happens when we no longer control our own future? When they leave, what happens to us?" Zara felt a chill run down her spine. DeLuca's words rang with a certain truth, a truth that she couldn't ignore. What was the cost of the Vasaari's help? Would humanity become a dependent species, relying on them forever? But deep down, Zara still believed in the promise of the Vasaari. She couldn't deny what she had seen with her own eyes, the progress, the changes. Was there a way to reconcile the two sides? Was there a middle ground between the resistance and the Vasaari? The weeks following her meeting with DeLuca were filled with uncertainty. As the resistance grew stronger, Zara found herself on the front lines of the debate. The world was at a crossroads, and humanity's choice would determine its future. Would Earth embrace the alien intervention, or would it stand against it, fighting to remain independent, even if it meant sacrificing the potential for a better world? Zara stood in the middle, trying to navigate the storm that surrounded her. She believed in the Vasaari, but could humanity truly accept their help without losing its soul? Could they integrate the changes they brought without losing their identity? As she pondered these questions, the world outside her window seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer. The resistance against the Vasaari had reached its peak. Streets that had once been filled with hope and excitement now buzzed with tension and fear. Every city, every government, had divided itself into two factions: the supporters of the Vasaari's promise of a new, prosperous Earth, and those who opposed them, fearing loss of power, autonomy, and control over their futures. Zara stood at the center of this whirlwind, caught between the hope she saw in the Vasaari's intervention and the doubts sown by the growing resistance. It had been weeks since she had last seen DeLuca, but his words haunted her. She had once believed that the Vasaari's help was a gift, an opportunity for humanity to begin again, free from the shackles of corruption and poverty. But now, she couldn't ignore the implications of their power. Were the Vasaari truly here to help? Or was this just another form of control, a way to subjugate humanity beneath the veneer of progress? The world was teetering on the edge, and Zara knew that the next decision would be critical. The Vasaari had offered everything: the means to heal the planet, to end hunger and disease, to restore justice and equality. They had not asked for anything in return, other than for humanity to work together for a better future. And yet, the resistance, with its growing strength and fervor, continued to fight back. Zara had been invited to a summit, a historic gathering where leaders from around the world, including representatives of the Vasaari, would come together to discuss humanity's future. It was to be a moment of unity, a chance for Earth to take the next step in the Vasaari restoration. But Zara couldn't shake the feeling that this summit could either mark the beginning of a new era, or the end of everything the Vasaari had built so far. As she made her way to the summit venue, Zara's mind was clouded with doubts. The resistance had grown, their influence spreading to every corner of the globe. They argued that humanity needed to remain independent, that no civilization, alien or otherwise, should dictate the future of Earth. While the Vasaari had given the world a taste of prosperity, the resistance feared that their offer of help came at a cost, the cost of human autonomy, the cost of Earth's identity. Zara had been a vocal supporter of the Vasaari, believing in their promise. But now, as the summit approached, she found herself questioning everything. Was she doing the right thing? Was it possible to accept their help without losing the very essence of what it meant to be human? The summit was held in a grand, sleek building in the heart of New York City. The Vasaari had helped reconstruct much of the infrastructure, using their advanced technology to repair the damaged cities and provide for the world's most pressing needs. As Zara entered the building, she couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the restored areas and the parts of the city still struggling under the weight of the old systems. It was as if the Vasaari had cast a light over the darkened corners of the world, but there were still shadows where the resistance lurked, ready to challenge everything the Vasaari had built. Inside the summit, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates from every country, from every government, sat around a massive table. Some faces were full of hope, others full of doubt. The Vasaari stood in their usual tranquil manner, not imposing but watching over the proceedings with a calm authority that made them seem both benevolent and omnipotent. The summit began with speeches from world leaders, all of them acknowledging the progress made with the Vasaari's help. Yet, there was a palpable undercurrent of resistance even within these speeches, and unease that humanity was too dependent on forces beyond their control. A few voices, quieter than the rest, began to ask the difficult questions. What happens when the Vasaari leave? What happens when their technology is no longer available? Zara sat at the table, trying to read the room. The Vasaari's representative, High Counselor Alcyon, stepped forward to address the assembly. Alcyon's presence was both powerful and serene. His eyes, glowing with an inner light, scanned the room as he spoke in the same soothing voice that had first reached Earth's ears. "We have watched your world for many cycles," Alcyon began, his voice calm but firm. "We have seen your suffering, your struggles, and your hopes. We did not come to take control, but to guide you toward the light of peace. The systems you have built are unsustainable, but we are not here to replace you. We are here to help you build a future that is free from hunger, disease, and inequality." He paused, allowing his words to settle in the room. "You may question our motives, and that is understandable. But we are not conquerors. We do not seek domination. What we seek is cooperation. The future of your planet lies in your hands, but we are here to help you reach it. Together, we will build a new world." Zara's heart stirred as she listened. The Vasaari's message had not changed, was still one of peace and unity, of a better future. But as the delegates listened, in silence, some with skepticism, others with anticipation, Zara realized that the next step would not be easy. The question was no longer whether the Vasaari's technology and influence would help Earth. It was whether humanity would accept their offer or reject it in favor of the old systems that had brought them to the brink of collapse. As the summit continued, the conversation became more heated. Representatives from the resistance spoke out, their voices rising in defiance. They argued that humanity had the capacity to rebuild on its own, without the interference of an outside force. They raised concerns about the loss of autonomy, about becoming dependent on alien technology. They painted a picture of a future where humanity would be subjugated by those who claimed to be saviors. The Vasaari listened patiently, their expressions unchanged, their resolve unwavering. They had heard these arguments before, from countless civilizations they had helped. But they were prepared for resistance. They had faced it before, and they knew the path to peace was rarely easy. The final decision came down to one simple question: would humanity embrace the changes the Vasaari had offered, or would it reject them in favor of self-determination, no matter the cost? Zara, standing at the heart of the summit, knew that this was the moment of reckoning. The world was at a crossroads. The Vasaari had given them the tools to rebuild tools that could end poverty, hunger, and disease, and usher in a new age of peace. But humanity had to decide whether it was willing to accept help or fight for its own independence, with all the risks that entailed. As the debate raged on, Zara knew that the choice before them would shape the future of Earth. She stood silently, watching the proceedings unfold. The world's fate was no longer in the hands of corrupt leaders or broken systems. It was in the hands of the people, and the Vasaari, peaceful, advanced, and wise, had given them the chance to take it. But the question remained, would they seize it?